Welcome back, YouTube. Today I'm bringing you a slightly different type of video because today marks the very first day of my cut, and I realized that I've never done any formal documentation of how I approach cutting phases whatsoever. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to share with you what I'm doing with my nutrition, my training, my supplementation, my cardio, and everything in between. For those of you who have really short attention spans, I'll be putting some timestamps into the first pinned comment below, so you can quickly jump to whatever section interests you the most, or whatever you want to review again. And of course, if you have any questions or need clarification relating to anything that I say in here, feel free to drop me a comment as well. Now, while you're at it, please do go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. It might not seem like much from your end, but every positive click like that supports this channel and the continual creation of content. Anyway, without any further ado, let's get stuck straight into it. So first of all, why am I going through a cutting phase in the first place? The simplest answer to this is to set myself a target to hold myself accountable to. But the real reason is my training partner Sherelle is currently prepping for a physique competition later this year, and I promised her that I would start dieting alongside her from 16 weeks out, because I felt like it'd be kind of rough for her to go through it on her own while we train together. While I do stay pretty close to the skin in terms of leanness year-round nowadays, it's been over 5 years now since I last did a dedicated few months focusing on getting as lean as possible. And getting to that next level of unhealthy dick skin lean condition is a whole different ballgame compared to just walking around in some sort of decent-ish shape. Now, in all honesty, I'm not really sure how lean I'm going to get or how far I really push things, because while I am curious and interested, I have to say that getting as lean as possible really isn't a lot of fun, and when it starts to interfere a lot with how I like to live my life with respect to my mood, my energy, my performance, and my sleep, I'll probably start scaling back. But I am very curious to see how far I can take things until I hit that point. So here's a start point. I took these photos first thing this morning cold. I don't have any weight scales here, which I don't recommend if you're doing any sort of dieting period, as it is really important to track as many variables as you can to make the most informed decisions moving forward. But I do feel confident enough in myself to be able to go off other metrics to track my progress and not overdo or underdo anything with my nutrition. But by my estimation, I'm probably sitting at around 75 kilograms and my height is 164 centimeters. Now, hopefully that doesn't go down as I diet. So this is my typical condition without having to focus too hard on my nutrition. I focus mainly on protein intake right now, ensuring that I hit roughly 135 grams of protein per day, and I shoot for around 3,000-ish calories. I'm pretty loose overall. I have a lot of snack accidents on the daily, with potato chips and popcorn being my favorite snacks, where I could easily put down a bag or two each day. And if I start to notice my performance dipping, I'll typically eat a bit more food. And if I notice my body fat creeps up a little bit too much, I pull back a bit and have less of the snacks. I eat roughly the same things across a week, with my typical protein sources being whole chickens, beef cheeks, beef liver, eggs, fish and oysters, and whey protein. My carbohydrates coming from rice, fruit and potato, and my fats usually just being from incidental cooking oils and animal fats from the meat and fish that I eat. I vary my vegetables up between whatever is in season and whatever I'm in the mood for. So currently I've been in a big mood for sprouting my own seeds, like broccoli seeds. You see, when your goal is more maintenance and to not have what would be considered in most cases an exceptionally unhealthy degree of leanness, nutrition itself doesn't have to be too complicated or too rigid. Because if you know how to listen to your body and the signals that it gives you with respect to performance, body composition, sleep, energy, mood, libido, appetite, and you know how to be logical and not get emotional and reactive over small fluctuations, you can achieve pretty good results and shouldn't have too hard a time maintaining some sort of degree of decent-ish condition. However, of course, if you want to go beyond that, then it will take a little bit more precision. How much really comes down to how much is needed at the given time. So my first steps with nutrition are going to be to simply give myself a bit more structure around my food and to remove all the free snacks and make sure I'm hitting certain portions of foods each week. The snacks themselves won't be removed altogether, but I'll just make sure that I have certain portions hit each week and I'm not eating completely freely ad libitum. That alone will bring with it an overall calorie drop by about 20 to 30%, coming from both carbohydrates and fats. But the main goal for now is to set some kind of structure up that I'll be following consistently. So from today, my typical day's diet is 3 meals of either 450 grams of potato or 250 grams of white rice, a portion of protein that equates to roughly 30 grams of protein. Not because that is how much protein is a magic number that you can't absorb more than that in one sitting, but simply because that's what works out by the numbers to be what I need to evenly spread it throughout the day. And I'll also have a protein shake, which I more so take out of convenience, so I don't need to eat an extra meal post-workout. As with my schedule right now, I prefer to get straight into some work after I train or go out for a skate or a walk instead of having to worry about cooking and cleaning up for a meal. The protein sources that I choose at the moment are whole chickens and beef cheeks as the 2 big mainstays, just out of convenience and flavor. I can throw a whole chicken or a big portion of beef cheeks into a slow cooker and forget about it for a few hours and it'll be ready to go with minimal prep and cleanup time. In terms of portioning this out and knowing how many calories or grams of protein I'm getting in each time, I simply take the weight of the whole chicken and spread that as I need to across however many meals it'll be. So for example, I know that out of a whole chicken, I usually get about 6 portions worth about 30 grams of protein. So I cook the entire thing up, then I eyeball 6 even portions, roughly, and consume that across 2 days. Same thing with beef. If a beef cheek weighs like 1 kilogram, I simply divide that up by however many meals it works out to being and spread that across the week. Honestly, it's not the most accurate way to go about doing things, and since I eat things like the skin, the cartilage, the tendons, and the bones of the chicken, and the broth that the beef or the chicken is cooked in as well, it really does skew things even more. But as long as I'm consistent with it each week, I'll be consistently inaccurate, and that's all that really matters. For example, if I started dividing that same sized whole chicken up into 8 portions instead of 6, that will decrease my calories each week with everything else being equal. Now, I think that's one mistake that people make a lot with their nutrition, and it's that they get too overly restrictive and try to nail every single macronutrient down to the gram, and they forget that we're not actually working with a rigid machine here, and we can afford to have some wiggle room and flexibility. Not in the realm of flexible dieting, but in the realm of knowing what really matters is not the number on the scale, but more so the consistency at which you stick with things so you can make informed decisions around changing things up with your nutrition long term. Now, I am sure that as I get leaner, I'll probably need to get a little bit stricter with things and more regimented, and I might need to change over to more accurate measurements. But for now, if it's working, there's no need to make big slashes or big restrictions unnecessarily. See, when it comes to making any nutritional adjustments for anybody, I always recommend going for the low-hanging fruit. Whatever is simplest and easiest to implement with the least amount of resistance. See, if instead I did a complete overhaul on everything, 1, I might not be able to stick with it long term as it's too drastic an interruption to my current lifestyle, and 2, it might not even be necessary or yield a better result, as you can only lose fat at a certain pace. Even if there were a benefit to it, it'd be hard to gauge accurately as I've changed so much up at once. How am I supposed to really know what my body was responding favorably to? So, next, let's take a look at my training. I train 4 days a week and have done so for the majority of this year. While there are an infinite number of it depends factors playing into it, and while I certainly have done more than this in the past, I really don't think people need to be doing more than about 3 or 4 sessions in a week. If you can't stimulate your body across that many sessions, then I would be questioning your programming, your exercise selection, your exercise setup, and overall performance on your sets. Now, this is more a discussion for another day, but the thing with training is that more volume is definitely better, but it will get to a point always where we can't keep creeping volume up higher and higher and higher because we're dealing with finite resources of recovery. What this means is there will come a point in time, especially as you get more advanced and are capable of pushing your body harder and harder each workout, where you have to find ways to do the same amount of volume on paper in terms of reps and sets, but find ways to increase the overall stimulus on your body in terms of stress on the muscle. That's the most important thing to keep in mind with training. Your body doesn't care about reps, sets, frequency, or anything like that. All it really cares about is the amount of stress or stimulus that gets placed on your body. So we use reps and sets and frequency and all those things as ways to measure how much stimulus we place on the body. But just because you're doing, say, 10 sets for quads, for example, doesn't mean that you're going to get more stimulus on your quads or your body more so than 5 sets, as it really comes down to not just the number of sets, but to other factors such as exercise selection, setup, performance of the exercise, the resistance profile of the exercise, and the task versus muscular fatigue ratio of the exercise. Anyway, without getting too tangential on that one for now, my training program right now is following a half body training split. So I train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Mondays and Fridays, I train glutes, hamstrings, chest, shoulders, calves, and triceps or biceps. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, I train back, quads, shoulders, and biceps or triceps. So I'm currently hitting each body part with dedicated sets twice per week, although of course there is going to be some crossover with things like glutes and quads and shoulders and arms, and they wind up being stimulated in some meaningful way pretty much every training day. Prior to this, I was following a full body training program where I was hitting every single body part 4 days per week, and I'm about 6 weeks now into the half body training split. Now, I love full body training, but I transitioned over to half body to allow me to put a little bit more volume per body part within each session, which should equate to more stimulus despite the sets across the week being the same as my full body routine. So what I mean by this is I average about 10 to 12 sets per body part each week. I was doing something similar when I was doing full body training as well. However, when I was doing full body training, that would equate to about 2 or 3 sets per day across the 4 days. Now, with half body workouts, that equates to 5 to 6 sets per day spread across only 2 days. So this is one small example that further highlights what I was talking about just a moment ago. Because yes, the sets and volume are largely unchanged, and even the exercises across the board are relatively similar, but the way that it's programmed per session is a different stimulus. And myself and everybody who's currently following the half body routine is finding it absolutely devastating. If you want to train with me, cheeky plug coming in, you can go get yourself a no obligation free 7-day trial to my app and website. There's a link in the description box below and you can check it all out. You also get full access to all of my workshops, my biomechanics tutorials, my lectures on things like pain and mobility, and so much more. Anyway, I don't like to change too much with training when going into a dieting phase. Technically, there are things you can do with your training to make it a slightly better stimulus from a fat loss or a conditioning perspective, but I prefer to not take those steps. So I look at training as having one primary goal, and that's muscle building, or at the very least, muscle maintenance. So the style of training that helps you build or maintain muscle will be the most important, in my opinion, through a dieting phase. I often find that when people try to do a fat loss specific workout, they end up simply doing mediocre weight workouts that no longer hit the target for muscle building or maintenance and fall well short of the threshold needed to have any meaningful response on fat loss. And that is why they wind up losing a ton of muscle mass. Instead, I will use nutrition and daily activity as the main driver for fat loss, and training is centered predominantly around muscle building and muscle maintenance. Which brings us to the next point, which is daily activity and cardio. I don't like to use cardiovascular exercise as a fat loss tool. It is a valid tool to use for fat loss, but I do also find it to be very inefficient. We need to understand that cardiovascular training is designed to improve the functioning of your cardiovascular system, or to build your aerobic base. This is incredibly important for a bunch of reasons, from a recovery, stress management, and even a sleep perspective that we're not going to get too deep into today. But the thing to understand is that cardio is so much more than just a way to create a calorie deficit. For me personally, I keep a rough eye on my daily activity through monitoring how active I am each day. For example, I make sure I go for a short half-an-hour walk each morning and at least one more through the day, followed by about 30 to maybe 60 minutes of skateboarding. Those are my minimums. It's not doing anything at a certain heart rate or anything like that, as I don't need to be boosting my aerobic or cardiovascular fitness at the present moment. It's simply a way for me to ensure that I'm hitting a daily activity number and keeps my levels of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, relatively high or at least consistent. This will become really important as I get further and further into a dieting phase, as what tends to happen is people might start training more or doing more cardio, but they also start doing a lot less movement overall outside of their structured exercise. So giving myself little goals and targets like this can help keep me more accountable, and of course that could also be looking at structured cardio training sessions if I preferred, but I simply don't like to do that kind of stuff at the moment. I would much rather go for a leisurely skate for an hour or so, or a few short walks out in nature, as opposed to slogging away on a specific cardiovascular protocol that I'm probably going to half-ass anyway and not get any extra benefits from. Supplementally, I'm only taking creatine and whey protein isolates and a multivitamin. I occasionally rotate through things like magnesium and vitamin D, but at the moment my levels here are optimal, so there's no need to add in any extra. I'm very minimalist nowadays when it comes to supplements, as for the most part I aim on getting as many things as I can through the food that I eat, and the reality is supplements will do absolutely nothing against a poorly managed lifestyle. So the big lifestyle factors that I'm managing as best as possible are sleep and stress. These are the two things that I'm always focusing on to a degree, but I'm giving myself a couple of goals each day to keep myself accountable to through this dieting phase. First is to ensure that I give myself 9 hours in bed each night, although that doesn't necessarily translate to 9 hours of sleep. See, most of the research points towards 7 to 9 hours of sleep being ideal for most people, and athletes needing closer to 9 hours, if not more. And I wouldn't necessarily call myself an athlete, but I do understand the demands and stress that I'm placing on my body. Because even simply being in a calorie deficit for a long period of time is a stress on the body, and it all accumulates. So while I might not need 9 hours sleep right now, I know that in the future, when things start getting more and more challenging with my training and my dieting, I probably will need closer to that 9 hours, and I'd rather have the lifestyle routine set up as early as possible as opposed to trying to make it fit later on when I need it. So that's a big mistake I see people doing, is they're not preemptive with their lifestyle scheduling and time management. They only deal with things like this when they become an issue, and don't have the foresight to predict that things might go pear-shaped in the future and that they should be investing some time and effort into setting up their lifestyle in a way that will set them up for success when the time does come. Instead, they get derailed when all the stress starts to accumulate after a couple of months of dieting, and then their sleep goes down the drain and they scramble to try to find a better way to schedule their lifestyle around it. The other big lifestyle things that I'm doing is scheduling in free time for mindful practices. Things like, for me, like playing guitar, listening to my vinyl records, and practicing skills like learning languages or some basic Brazilian jiu-jitsu drills are all important things that I love to do that also have the added benefit of relaxing the mind and taking me out of the constant dopaminergic barrage of modern day living that tends to create a lot more mental cognitive stress. You see, the most important aspect to any structured cut or dieting phase is long-term adherence. People usually have the conversation around long-term adherence with things like flexible dieting strategies and if it fits your macros, but to me, long-term adherence has to evolve beyond that and look to how are you setting up your lifestyle in a way that is conducive to you being able to stick with your plan and not feel like you're suffering through it all. So, there you have it, guys. I hope this video has given you a lot of useful insights that you can take into your own dieting phases. And of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them below. And I'll see you guys next time.